Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about John Nkengong Nkengasong's Black Caps and Red Feathers. So this is a play from Cameroon, Anglophone Cameroon, interestingly enough. I didn't really know there was an Anglophone Cameroon prior to looking into Nkengasong, because the majority of Cameroon, I believe, was colonized by the French. And so I think of Cameroonian literature as a Francophone literature. But apparently, there's a small sort of northern sliver of Cameroon that was colonized by the British. And so they have an Anglophone literature. So that's fun. So Black Caps and Red Feathers. This is very much a post-colonial play. It is concerned primarily with the military dictatorships that emerged in many portions of post-colonial Africa and with Neo-Colonialism. But what I find really striking and interesting about this play is that it also reflects these European influences, European theatrical influences in its dramaturgy. And so I'll talk about all of that stuff. So, there's two primary characters in this play. There is Creature, who is our main character. Creature inhabits this sort of garbage dump. He had been... It's not 100% clear what kind of position he might have held in his clan, but he had been someone of some type, some degree of influence. And his clan had been rebellious, or at the very least, not entirely loyal to the king, Truro. Truro is a sort of brutal military dictator, and we find out that because Creature... So this clan had a number of leaders who were leading this sort of resistance movement against Truro. Creature witnessed the execution of one of them, and he went back to the clan and told them that this leader had been executed. Another leader went into hiding, and Truro and his soldiers basically captured Creature, brought him in, and tortured him, detained him, kept him in solitary confinement in this very sort of wet, dank cell, denied him food, force-fed him feces and urine, tortured him in various ways with electricity, with pepper in his eyes and his genitals, etc., etc. Very, very brutal stuff. But also very much, unfortunately, not that unusual for military dictators. We also learn that Truro is backed by a power referred to as the Alps, which seems to maybe be a sort of generic reference to Europe. It's not 100% clear to me from reading this, but it does seem to be a general reference to Europe. And so what we have is Truro as this military dictator who has set himself up in command of this post-colonial nation, this nation that had been colonized by the Alps. They have now been liberated from direct control of the Alps. We have what's called Neo-Colonialism. And so Neo-Colonialism there's a number of different models of it, but one model is where European or American governments and corporations basically prop up dictatorships of local leaders, right? So local leaders who their power and ability to command is basically built on the wealth and the weaponry of the global north in exchange for access to resources, cheap labor, markets to sell excess goods, space to dump industrial waste, whatever it is. So all of these things. Basically, the continued resource extraction from the global south into the global north, but now, rather than as under direct colonialism, in which the global north simply went and took the stuff that it wanted from the global south, under neo-colonialism, you have the global north working with local rulers who facilitate that same kind of resource extraction. So that's what we have going on. Creature is opposed to this along with the people of his clan, but Truro has this sort of overwhelming military force that he can bring to bear in order to kill those he wants to kill, to torture those he wants to torture, etc., etc. And so we have a very significant indictment of neo-colonialism. We have a significant indictment of the military dictatorships, very common, unfortunately, throughout the global south, particularly when Creature is talking about his experiences being tortured, which he talks about extensively in the play. But we also have the spirit of Truro who comes to Creature. And we don't, because we can't be sure of Creature's mental stability, we don't know whether this is a genuine paranormal experience. It may very well be, or whether this is something that happens in Creature's mind. But the spirit of Truro following his death comes to Creature, and they have this conversation, which I think really sort of reflects that critique of economic neo-colonialism and the use of local leaders who, as sort of middlemen, to carry out the extractive goals of the global north. So the voice tells Creature that Truro has died. The Creature says, "How comes this? Where is your body?" The voice says, "Buried abroad. It ended there." Creature says, "In the Alps?" The voice says, "No, elsewhere." Creature says, very disturbed, says, "Why not in the Alps?" And the voice says, "The Alps befouled me and I lost everything. Everything that I stood for, everything that I fought for, all's lost. I met psychiatrists and they told me I was dying. They punctured my heart with a pin and let life seep out of me gradually to my end, saying all would be well for me, so I could continue my vocation." The creature says, wrenching necks. Voice says, "That's it. But shortly after that, I was hurled out of the Alps to die gradually elsewhere. I wept for the remaining days of my life for all that was lost. Oh, my cap and feather." The cap and feather of the title represents Truro's office as king of this nation. Creature says, "And your skulls and testes and tanks of blood." Those are the things that Truro is sort of most associated with. It is cutting off heads, cutting off testicles, and then large amounts of blood. And voice says, "Everything. They deceived me and I took away everything from the clan to their country. When I was desperate, they rejected me. They would not even allow me to live on their refuse dumps. Those people are not good friends. All that's left is my spirit. I walk the nights and days hungrily. I haven't tasted any good thing for a long time. Everything disavows me. I haunted the night for food. The night became so chilly. I waited for the clan to make a solemn funeral for me. I craved them to carry my remains back home, but nothing happened. The night became so chilly for a stranger ghost, and I returned to the clan. And so what happens to Truro, or at least this voice that represents Truro, again, whether this is in Creature's head or not, is essentially that the European economic masters that he had served in exploiting his own people have rejected him. They are not interested in him in any way. And this is really kind of representative of what Frantz Fanon talked about in his book, The Wretched of the Earth, where and this was prior to the sort of wave of national independence successes in Africa and elsewhere in the 60s. He talks about how one of the things that will happen is that local leaders, bureaucrats, etc., will continue to work on behalf of Europeans, but Europeans will still see them as inferior, as less than. And this is exactly what plays out with Truro here, right? He had brutally oppressed his own people in the economic interests of the Alps, and the Alps rejected him when he was no longer useful, when he was no longer in power. So we've got those critiques. But this play, Black Caps and Red Feathers, also has these very, to me, stark European dramaturgical influences. One of which is connected to Creature. So Creature to me seems very much to be a Beckett character, a Samuel Beckett character, in two major connections. One is that he lives in this refuse dump. It starts here, Act 1. The scene is a voluminous garbage heap carrying assorted ordure. In Beckett's play Endgame, two of the characters live in trash cans. But Creature also seems incapable of leaving this place. He is continually waiting. He's waiting, in some sense, for Truro to come and set him free, which he demands over and over again, but he seems suspended in this space. So his first lines are, that's him, that's his voice, that's his guttering voice. He comes to release me at last. For certain I will be freed, I will be released. He prances about in excitement. I will see my wife and little ones again after a long, long time. Hooray, King Truro. He pauses, looks about hopefully. No one comes in sight. No voice calls. Resigning. He says, it cannot be Truro. Then he listens. Truro cannot come unless I confess to the clan that I told a lie. Does one swear a lie by telling it? Isn't that sheer madness? Isn't that sheer madness? So this idea of waiting, this sort of eternal waiting, this waiting that never goes away, is the root of Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, in which two characters, Vladimir and Estragon, or Didi and Gogo, as they're also known, are waiting for Godot, whose arrival is eternally postponed. Creature is in the same kind of space, and so there is a sort of Beckettian absurdism to this play. But the other thing that we have, the other character that we have that I haven't really talked about, is Lunatic. And lunatic is this sort of Greek chorus figure. Not only does lunatic show up periodically to comment on what's going on, his dialogue reflects this fascination with truth, fate, the gods, duty, things like this. Themes that are really central to Greek tragedy. So, Lunatic's first bit, the sort of prologue bit. I had no sleep tonight. Even now my heart is crammed with monstrosity, with the voices of death and life. I thought to myself that I shall tell the story in tears, when one morning I shall wake from sleep to find that I am dead, believing that we men who wear our cloaks the right sides are sane and civilized men. But the wailing voices of future generations filled my mind, and peals of thunder rumbled in my heart, and I felt Fundum's wrath in his stormy voice that said, "You messenger of truth, you are the divine bat that sees all in a dream. I sent you to the world to prophesy, to fill the lives of men with truth. Now you lie there musing, feeding on your own thoughts like the hen that ate its own eggs. How can you, knowing all that is true, disdain till after you were dead? Glory is he who perceives and speaks it plain, or he becomes the snake that refused fewer legs because it claimed it was bigger than the millipede and died having none. That is why I came to you, clansmen, soon as I saw the first crack of dawn, to make you see the truth about our fates here at life's farthest end." He points toward the stage. "Is death in life a creature of its own kind, desolate on the garbage heap, pushed asunder by the aberration of logical men? Here is the world's rejected end in the destined Afingakong, the unbending apostle of truth." That by the way, Afingakong is creature. Swaddled in the strong stench of the cadavers of civilization, colonies of flies buzzing about him, I do not intend to wake him from his dream. I hear him groan already. Listen to his testimony, the testimony of Afingakong, the unflinching apostle of truth. I must leave the place. He would not see me here meditating on his plight. And so Lunatic introduces our protagonist. He sets him up in terms of these themes of truth, destiny, fate, the gods, things like this, as well as suffering. All of these traditionally very Greek tragedy-linked themes. And, of course, as a person who grew up in British under British colonialism, particularly in Africa, Nkengasong would have been educated on British drama like Beckett. Even though Beckett was Irish, he often gets included in this broad category of British drama, and classical European drama, because the British colonial education system was meant to instill this sense that European culture was vastly superior, and to erase as much as possible African culture.